Okay. Welcome, everybody. Really pleased to have you all here. This is the second of our 3 workshop series on how to build an Indigenous brand. I have Mark Rutledge with Animikii here to present to us today. But maybe I'll start first with the land acknowledgement. So I'm joining you from Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam territory, commonly known as Vancouver today. It is a real pleasure to be here on the land of the Indigenous people of the West Coast. My name is Raylene Whitford. I'm the co-founder of INDIGI-X, and it's a real pleasure to be able to present this capacity building workshop with you all. And it's so great to see new faces. Our network is growing incredibly. And this is a real dream of Chris, my co-founder, and I, to be able to bring Indigenous people from not only Canada, but all around the world to work together. So I just have a quick kind of house rules presentation. So this is going to be our agenda. Basically the presentation from Mark. Because we're such a small group, I think we'll have a lot of opportunity to ask questions at the end. We are going to start with an opening prayer, as we do with all of our INDIGI-X workshops and meetings. So with that, I would love to invite Bob Silverthorne to offer us a prayer in Cree.
Well, thank you, everyone. Pleasure to join. I think the wonderful part of anyone is to give us a direction for on the path we're all together on. So, particularly, I wanted to think of as I sit here in sunny Alberta. It's 0 Fahrenheit and lovely snow coming down, and cold other places and warm other places. And so it's hard to understand, but I think I wanted to share this knowledge of the thoughts of Pipon, the winter. Winter is a wonderful time for the people of the plains, Sundance culture, and because it's a time of ceremonies, our teepee tales. This is when we say, Gayasa Tochimwin will tell you these old stories and the traditions of Witsaketak. And it's an important one because many people think of winter, if they've never acknowledged it or having been part of it, as I share with our brothers and sisters in other places. And but here in Alberta and in Canada, it's different in various places. But I think the Pipon, the winter, is the season of cold and dark, but it's an amazing season. It's the one season of the year that man can walk where no man has ever trod before, on the frozen lakes, over the ones that swim in the water, and they still fly in the air. But really important. And winter is the promise, with the snow covering the ground, like the white hair of the people we respect, like Xenowak, the knowledge keepers. And they share this is the time to share this knowledge. And so it's important as we come together. And one of the major things of the plains is that Wakutuin, that we're all related, we all share and acknowledge similar things in contact with the land. And I think it's really important that with the snow covering the ground is not the barren cold time, but it's a special time, because it's the promise of new life in the spring. And that's so important. And so the people and the animals take winter Pipon, and they travel the road that the Creator has given us, each in our ways and our ways of our people. And really important to walk that road. Some may think that you only walk those roads that are given to you by the Creator in the daylight, but it's so important to know that in Cree belief and people of the plains, that Pipon, of winter, we have the road is lit for us in all the ways that Pimokte, Meosan, Meskino, may we walk that good road. And then the daylight, the sun lights our way, but in the nighttime, Tipskao Pisim, the night sun lights our way as we move forward. And so we we give thanks for the day, this day. We give thanks, with the deepest part of my heart. I give thanks for this coming together, for this day that we share, and for this knowledge. So when we do our ceremonies, each in our own ways, Amatutsan, when we go to a sweat lodge and we give offering cloths, we panasanan, we give those offering cloths and we hang them to continue those prayers of thanks, not of begging, but of thanks. And it's really important to know that. So just give me just a moment, if you'll share with me, and each in your own way, in your own language, the thoughts for today. Noktawinan, Haink Samanto, Samanto Gosan, Nanaskumta notes, Nanaskumta Nakakio, Miwakutuin, Petokan Minakapik Squata, Mina Pimoktea Melson Meskino. Thank you, our creator of us all. Thank you for this day. Thank you for the opportunity to come together. Thank you for this opportunity to walk the road that you've laid for us as we come as a group of people with Melson Meskino, a good road. We have good thinking, we have good minds that you've given us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Okay. So welcome, everybody. We have members, or I guess our network from Canada, New Zealand, and Fiji today. And we'll be later posting this video up on our channel on YouTube. So Chris and I have had a number of Indigenous peoples from across the world interested in the program. So I think that in the coming weeks, we'll have a lot more different countries joining and enjoying the presentation here made today by Mark. So just a few house rules. So turn on your video. If you don't want to be recorded, don't worry about it. Please stay on mute for the duration of Mark's presentation, just to avoid some background noise. Please engage with each other with respect. As Indigenous people, that's one of our core values. So don't really need to say that. And following the presentation, we'll have a question period. So we'll save some time for everybody to ask questions directly to Mark and continue the conversation. We're a small group today, so we can probably just ask questions informally, but with some of our larger sessions that we've had in the past, we've had up to 80 people attend, and so we've had to teach people how to raise their hands. But in this day and age with Zoom, I think that this has become second nature to us. So yeah. So I'll hand it over to Mark now. Maybe if you want to start with a quick introduction, because I haven't quite introduced you. And yeah, we look forward to your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to quickly share my screen with you. First of all, I want to say Chimagwich for that opening prayer. I love hearing opening prayers and the language of our people. I'm Ojibwe and Anishinaabe from Northern Ontario, but I love our cousins and our brothers and sisters from across Canada. So thank you very much, Miigwech, for that fine opening prayer. It always gives me goosebumps when I hear our language being spoken. Okay, so let's dive into this. I'm going to share my screen here for you all. Okay, can everyone see that? The opening screen. Indigenous design, beyond medicine, wheels, ox carts, and Inukshuks. Good afternoon and good morning to my relatives down in New Zealand and Fiji and the Pacific. I wish I had your weather. Right now it's it's about -30 in Whitehorse, Yukon. I'm in northern Canada. For those of you that are not familiar with the Yukon and more, we are sitting beside Alaska. And so today was a beautiful day. It was blue skies, a bit cold, but this is the lay of the land. So before I begin, I would like to as Raylene had already done, do a land acknowledgement. So from where I am presenting to you today, I am in Whitehorse, Yukon, and those are the traditional territories of the Kwanlin Dun First Nation and the Da'an Quechan Council. So I want to recognize that I live and play on these traditional territories, and I too am a visitor to this region. I am Ojibwe from Northern Ontario. So I am a visitor, even though I've been here for 10 years running now. This is a place that I find very welcoming, and the people here are amazing. So just wanted to acknowledge that. So a bit more about me. My name is Mark Rutledge. I am the Anishinaabe Wolf Clan. I'm also a 60 scoop survivor. For those of you that may not be familiar with the 60 scoop, it is the forced removal of Indigenous children from their families and homes and placed into non-Indigenous families. So this was started in the early 60s and actually continues today. But I am proud to say that even though my start in life was very difficult and challenging, we are resilient people, and I am here today because I stand on the shoulders of my ancestors, and they give me the power to continue. And all of the people that I've met along this journey have helped me to be where I am today. So I'm very grateful for that. My mother is from Little Grand Rapids First Nation in Northern Manitoba, and my father is from Lexil First Nation in Northern Ontario. So like I said, I'm currently the lead designer at Animikii. I'm one of a handful of Indigenous certified graphic designers in Canada. I'm also the first Indigenous national president of the Graphic Designers of Canada, a first in its 65-year history. I'm also the first to lead from Canada's Arctic region. Many firsts for me. So I'm super proud that I can be part of my industry as a designer. The GDC is actually a nonprofit membership-based organization that supports designers in Canada. I'm also pleased to say that during my tenure as national president, I've started with my own funds the first Indigenous scholarship, the GDC Foundation Cheryl Lynn Rutledge Northern Indigenous Student Award, which was created to support Northern Indigenous students pursuing an education in graphic communication design in Canada at a Canadian post-secondary college or university. This $1,000 scholarship is established in honor of my mother, Cheryl Lynn, who was my support and my inspiration, and who passed away in 2016. So that's me in a nutshell. I live in Whitehorse, Yukon. I am happily married. I have 3 children and two huskies and 2 birds. So moving on to Animikii. What is Animikii? Well, Animikii is headquartered in Victoria, BC. So I work remotely here in the Yukon and use Zoom and all these online tools to help me collaborate with my team in Victoria, BC. Animikii works with leading Indigenous focused organizations from all industries to drive positive change for Indigenous peoples through technology. We have a 15-year track record of delivering technology solutions exclusively for Indigenous communities and organizations. As Indigenous technologists, we are personally and professionally vested in your success. Your success is our success. Animikii is a 100% Indigenous owned and a certified B Corp business. So first up, we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about 4 main subjects during this presentation. One of them is thinking twice, telling stories, medicine wheels, and Pan Indigenous. Sorry, I was too busy talking and I forgot to go through these slides, but these are slides of how diverse and how beautiful our people are. Everyone from Métis to the First Nations in Canada to Indigenous peoples all around the world. So, thinking twice. Why should you think twice about using cultural and spiritual symbols in your visual design and communication projects? Well, we must be careful when using cultural symbols. By using the feather, the infinity symbol, the Inukshuk, the medicine wheel, or traditional patterns, the meaning and the teaching behind them are being diluted, lost, or overlooked. My intent here is to open a discussion around the appropriate use of Indigenous culture and spirituality in design and communication projects, particularly logos and brands. Today, I'll focus on some icons that are overused elements in design, for example, like the ox cart, infinity symbol, Inukshuks, igloos, headdresses, teepees, feathers, traditional patterns, and medicine wheels. I'd like to build the case that there are numerous ways to create visually appealing designs that communicate ideas effectively and that are not limited to the standard go-to or stereotypical design elements that are that often get overused. So, for example, here we have an example of what the medicine wheel is. We have the 4 colored quadrants, and each one has a different meaning that I will get into a bit later. So, brands. Brands tell stories. We use brands in business, marketing, and advertising as there are different definitions of branding. In this instance, I'll use the one from the American Marketing Association. A brand is a name, a word, design, symbol, or other feature that distinguishes an organization or product from its rivals in the eyes of the customer. The purpose of a brand is to deliver a message, confirm credibility, connect an audience with a product or service, encourage customers to buy and build up customer loyalty over time. It's a lot to accomplish with only a few symbols, images, and messages. For a brand to succeed, it's essential to understand the wants and needs of the consumer and prospects. It's an expression of who you are and what you offer. A strong brand is critical in your marketing communications, and it should tell the story of your business or organization. So let's take a closer look at the medicine wheel. Having a medicine wheel in a logo is one example that has become shorthand for we are an Indigenous organization. And while it's great to showcase your organization's Indigenous leadership, especially if you serve Indigenous customers or clients, the medicine wheel is not the only or even the best way to share this with your customers. As a cultural person, I believe everyone could and should have a greater understanding of the many lessons that the medicine wheel has to teach us. What I want to talk about is how Indigenous organizations, leaders, and entrepreneurs often use the medicine wheel in logos and brands for nations, products, organizations, services, events, and everything in between. To put this discussion in the context of appropriate use of medicine wheels, I'll briefly explain what I've been taught about them. The medicine wheel goes back generations. Our ancestors have used and shared its teachings for thousands of years. It's evolved and adapted over time, but most people are familiar with its current form, the circle with the 4 colored quadrants of white, yellow, red, and black. The 4 colors represent the 4 different races of humanity. Those that serve the 4 directions, north, east, south, and west, the elements of air, water, fire, and earth, the seasons, winter, spring, summer, and fall, and the parts of a day, dawn, noon, dusk, and midnight. The 4 sacred medicines of sweetgrass, tobacco, cedar, and sage, even the stages of life, birth, growth, maturity, and death, and the essence of what makes us human, intellect, emotion, spiritual, and the physical. Each quadrant also represents a spirit animal. In Ojibwe teachings, those animals are the buffalo, the mouse, the eagle, and the bear. Jay Dumont describes the evolving medicine wheel design in culture, behavior, and identity of the Native person as the circle, being primary, influences how we as Indigenous peoples view the world. In the process of how life evolves, how the natural world grows and works together, how all things are connected, and how all things move toward their destiny. Indigenous peoples see and respond to the world in a circular fashion and are influenced by the examples of the circles of creation in our environment. Pan-Indigenous. Alternatives to Pan-Indigenous design. It's clear upon a quick explanation of its meaning why the medicine wheel is a popular symbol for Indigenous organizations. It represents every aspect of the physical, the spiritual, and emotional life. However, a defining trait of a successful brand is its specificity. How can you explain who you are and what you do as an organization by using a symbol that encompasses every aspect of life? Unique brands stand apart from their competitors. The medicine wheel or other sacred iconography and design is becoming the default image for Indigenous organizations. Therefore, your brand is likely to become overlooked. However, there are deeper consequences of using stereotypical Indigenous iconography in your brand design. Sadie Redwing, a graphic designer and advocate for tribal visual sovereignty, said, "We have a whole visual language to explore and expose, not exploit. And it doesn't have to be stereotypical. Give them something they aren't used to seeing." There is also a great risk of perpetuating what Redwing calls pan-Indianism, a philosophy and movement promoting unity among different American Indian groups in the Americas, regardless of tribal or local affiliations. What this results in is the same images, dream catchers and feathers and arrowheads and turtles, medicine wheels and headdresses, used as an Indigenous indicator rather than representing their spiritual roots. This applies to the overuse of the medicine wheel iconography. To quote Stuart Hall, "Meaning is what gives us a sense of our own identity, of who we are and with whom we belong." If we use the same images over and over, particularly if the image is not from our own beliefs, we not only risk reinforcing stereotypes, but also risk homogenizing Indigenous beliefs and culture. As graphic communicators, we need to dig deeper and not use stereotypical images in our visual communications. Oh. Okay, but is there a compromise or some middle ground? As in life, compromise and flexibility is something that we should all be a part of. If you are a designer, you may have a client come to you with a clear vision of what they want, and you may want you may not want coming off as being disrespectful when you're asked to include an infinity symbol or Inukshuk or medicine wheel to the logo. If you are tasked with developing a logo for an Indigenous focused organization that you work at, you may have a board of directors or an elders council or another advisory group that will all have input. We often work in collaborative environments, and within the Indigenous community, consensus building is rooted in how we work. If we must incorporate a particular cultural or symbol or spiritual element into the design, I recommend that you first consider the teachings it provides and what other solutions you can incorporate into your brand strategy, mission, or brand values. For example, you can incorporate the medicine wheel into your organizational culture, but using a sacred image as part of your iconography to identify yourself as an Indigenous organization is not only perpetuating a stereotype, but also not telling the customer and stakeholders who you are. So I'm going to present two case studies. The first one is when co-branding comes into play. So it may not always be possible to exclude this type of iconography when dealing with multiple organizations and clients that use them. For example, Sport Yukon had approached us to design the 2019 National Aboriginal Hockey Championships brand. It had to be unique and identify with the spirit of the Yukon through an Indigenous lens. The final solution represents the North, the Yukon First Nations, and the sport. But we also use 3 icons: the infinity loop, the Inukshuk, and the eagle. You're wondering why we did this, because I just said we shouldn't do this. But in some cases, we need to make some compromises. So these 3 icons represent the branding for the Aboriginal Sports Circle, the organization that first founded the National Aboriginal Hockey Championships back in 2001. Because they're the founding organization, we needed to include their branding into the logo. This sometimes is referred to as co-branding. In this case, we use the Aboriginal Circle, Sports Circle brand in conjunction with the new brand for the National Aboriginal Hockey Championships. Case study number 2, incorporate Indigenous art and teachings. In some cases, we are invited and encouraged to use spiritual symbols and icons, provided that there is a good rationale for their use. For example, the Turtle Island Institute needed a logo for their organization that has roots in Anishinaabe and Ojibwe culture and territory. The Turtle Island Institute is a global First Nations-led social innovation think and do tank that seeks the transformation of social ecological systems towards a more balanced and sustainable world to pursue what the Anishinaabe call the way of a good life. The final logo incorporates the Ojibwe creation story of Turtle Island. It also incorporates important elements that communicate the connections and interactions within a group of people, and to showcase the power of knowledge generation, dissemination, and facilitation. During our creative process, we sometimes develop options that the client loves so much that they'll even purchase those as well. Some of you may be familiar with the woodland style of illustration. It should be noticed that I'm Anishinaabe myself, and I've had the teachings and mentorship in creating art in the woodland style. If I was not of the same nation, I would not have been able to design this particular option. I would have had to have subcontracted the illustration work to a person from that particular region or First Nation, simply out of respect. So moving forward, remember, a great brand must be original and unique. Rather than resorting to stereotypical Indigenous iconography, consider challenging yourself to come up with something unique that shows your customers without a doubt who you are as an organization. Odds are you'll rework your design several times because the original concepts aren't always the best solutions. But the result will be something you and your organization will be proud of and will certainly make you unique. In closing, I want to say that we need to ensure that we include all Indigenous communities and people to the table before any project gets started. We want to be inclusive and be mindful that diversity can only make your project stronger. Is diversity and inclusion really that important? Yes, it is. Technology and globalism make this vital and necessary as it leads to more innovation. The design field cannot advance without contrasting ideas from different viewpoints. It's important that we welcome expression and participation from all ethnic, gender, and socioeconomic populations, because their insight and experiences can inform and enrich the lives of our society. In order to successfully lead improvement and change, we must openly embrace more diverse practitioners and retain them through inclusion. It is our responsibility to foster new talent and create communities of contributors who represent a more realistic gender and ethnic ratios in order to give everyone an equal chance to succeed. Additionally, we can take measures to avoid placing stereotypes on other cultures. The chances of this happening decrease when diversity is welcomed. We then get the chance to understand the history behind certain elements of another culture. The more professionals of different backgrounds know about each other, the better we can create intelligent and sensitive expressions. We can't afford to lose the amazing contributions that can be made by misrepresented segments of our population. To inspire you, I've compiled a list of additional resources of effective and beautiful creatives from Indigenous artists and studios from across Turtle Island and beyond. Oh, sorry, I skipped all of that, sorry. There we have it, Chimigwich, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. I think we covered a lot of ground in what you presented, and I'm mindful that a lot of what you said applies to not only Indigenous people in Canada but around the world. And I'd like to open it up for questions, but I think that I'll take the first question because I've been thinking about this for weeks now when I first invited you to come and present. So to me, I think design stems from identity, right? How well would you say an organization or an Indigenous business, an Indigenous person would have to understand their own identity even before they start this whole design process? And I think to just give some context from a personal standpoint, maybe a bit of storytelling for everybody that joined the call. So I'm Cree Métis. My family's from Plains, the Plains area in Alberta, and I grew up being always told that I was Dutch. Our family would identify as Dutch. We had a pair of wooden shoes on my parents' TV stand or whatever in the living room. And we were never taught anything about our indigeneity. So I've gone through my own process of understanding where I come from, who my family is, and my own identity as an Indigenous person. That journey started when I was in the UK and when I was standing at a photocopier in a large accountancy firm in London. And I told somebody, I admitted to them, I'm Indigenous. And that was one of the first times that they said, wow, that's cool, as opposed to the racism and things that you get when you're back in your home country. I assume that it's the same for our cousins outside of Canada on the call. So that was the first kind of turning point where I began to kind of see my indigeneity as a good thing. Since then, I've gone through a whole process, both personal, both professional, and now academic, because I'm doing a PhD in Indigenous Studies and Business, to understand who I am and what my values are, relearn my community's values, receive the teachings, pick medicines with my cousins, for example. So I guess, to make a long story short, how well do you need to understand that before you start this process? Because I'm appreciative that the symbols that I may have seen as somebody who didn't understand themselves many years ago, they have these depths of teachings. I don't know if that made any sense, but
it does make sense. You know what? And first of all, I just want to say that everyone is on their journey, whether that's a healing journey or their identity journey. And I can speak to that from a personal perspective because having taken my culture and my identity away from me by the by the powers that be, I was removed from all of that. I didn't know my language. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know why I was brown to, or different from everybody else, right? So being from a northern community and being dropped into one of the largest cities in North America and surrounded by white people was quite shocking. And so what it was a long journey for me to be where I am today. And but some part of me wanted to reconnect. Something deep down inside needed to reconnect with my Indigenous identity. And I know that's meant that may not be the same for everybody, but I would like to say that it's similar to a lot of people. Growing up, not knowing that culture, my culture, being part of that 60 Scoop generation, I actually founded a nonprofit organization in Ottawa called All My Relations. And its main goal was to help Indigenous people that were affected by the apprehension of Indigenous children reconnect with their families. So that was one of the first things that I did was, wanting to help others before researching myself, because I felt the pain and that disconnection with your Indigenous identity. So I wanted to help others like myself because I knew there was thousands of us that were removed. And so when we applied this Indigenous identity to business, I would say that it is important, but like I said, we are all on this learning journey together, and that we shouldn't let that hold us back in wanting to learn more. Because there was a time when I didn't know anything about any of this culture, about medicine wheel teachings or Inukshuks and their meaning and all of this. But I wanted to learn more. I had that desire to learn more about my own culture, but First Nations culture in Canada. I mean, there are over 630 unique First Nations in Canada. And that doesn't include America, which has another over 550 Indigenous nations in the South. And I hate using that term, America and Canada, because honestly, we are all one people. We all have relatives south of us, and we very much have a lot of similar challenges and difficulties that we all are overcoming. And so Indigenous identity plays a role, but like I said before, it's not that imperative, I would say, because you can always seek knowledge keepers and ask those questions. And that's what I do. I ask a lot of questions. And I was watching that presentation on YouTube from Run, and he too asks a lot of questions, because that's how we learn, And so when I speak about my own culture and my protocols and traditions and ceremonies, I learn from that. I learn from our clients, our partners, our mentors, our elders, our knowledge keepers. And like I said earlier in my presentation, that Animikii has those 7 values. And one of them is that learning and listening. It's listening not to respond, but to listen deeply. And I know in my conversations with elders, when I ask a question, they'll sit there and they'll wait like what sometimes seems forever. And they'll wait and they'll sit. And when I was younger, I was so impatient. I was like, oh my gosh, did I say something wrong? Did I ask a stupid question? And it turns out they're actually thinking in their mind what the proper response is to that question. Because language and the way we talk is important. We all come from an oral tradition, and that is super important. So, in today's era where we all have immediate gratification, social media, Twitter, Facebook, everything is there. We need to take the time to slow down and listen and learn. And that's really the important thing, I think, is to want to learn more about your culture. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. Have courage and bravery, because you too will learn all that you want to learn. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Mark. I think to me, identity is definitely something that's changing for Indigenous people worldwide. And I think for me personally, having that sense is really important before you go out and show others, whether it's through a brand or a design or what have you. So yeah, that helps. I have loads more questions, but I'll open it up to everybody else on the call first. Does anybody have a question for Mark? No? Okay, well, if you do, oh, go ahead, Patricia, you're on mute. There we go.
Hi, thank you. And I have been listening. And so this is my first call with you guys. And so I'm excited. I work with a lot of Indigenous entrepreneurs, and sometimes it's a challenge, as Mark pointed out, about items that are sacred. And so I know with my discussions with Indigenous entrepreneurs that a lot of times that they will go to those knowledge keepers or offer that tobacco or go into ceremony, especially if they're using symbolism around like sweetgrass. So we have a sweetgrass communications team here. In your work with Indigenous entrepreneurs, have you ever come back? We're from Saskatchewan, by the way. I apologize, I didn't introduce where I'm from. And so we find that a lot of times when people are looking at their products or their services, incorporating their names and attaching it to a story like what you shared at the beginning, Mark. But we've also had people come back and say, I don't want to come out as a Indigenous person, not because I'm not proud of being Indigenous, not because I don't know who I am, but they feel that it can hold them back in terms of market share, especially, for example, beauty salons or service industries, where they don't want to be just kind of stereotypically servicing First Nations Métis only. Any comments in terms of not branding, I guess, as Indigenous, if you are Indigenous, and just putting yourself out there as your service?
Oh, great question. You know, when we start a project with a particular with our clients, we send them a design questionnaire, and it's a list of about 25 questions that are specific, or I would say that dig deeper into what that organization or that company is. And so it's not specific about Indigenous culture or indigeneity or cultural symbols. It digs deeper in the sense that we ask questions about who they are, who their competition is, right? What industry are they competing in, and who are their competitors? And so, you know, the design questionnaire is non-specific in that way, because when we establish or start to design or develop a brand, it's not necessarily culture driven, and that really depends on the client. You know, if they choose not to ignore or feature their indigeneity, then that's fine. We can definitely work with that. But the questionnaire, you know, is not specific. You know, some of our clients don't want to be specific. They don't want to acknowledge the fact that they're Indigenous, and that's fine. But we still work with them to establish a brand that is on point and resonates with them and their clientele. So sometimes Indigenous identity doesn't come into play, and sometimes it does. But at the root of it all, we want to find out and build that foundation. And that's why we ask all those questions, so we can build up that foundation and then build that brand, a strong brand. Because if you don't have a strong foundation, your house is going to fall apart, right? So that's why we ask these questions, and a lot of questions. And sometimes it takes our clients aback a bit, because they're like, wow, I didn't realize you guys are going to pepper me with so many questions. But that's where we get to the root of the problem and that we're trying to solve.
Great.
I have one more question. Sorry.
Go ahead, Patricia.
Yeah, but I don't want to take up all the time. So if somebody else has a question. Okay. So.
Go ahead, Patricia.
Okay, thank you. And so I worked with a corporation where we started a lot of new businesses. And so a lot of times they were coming to us as employees of the corporation to come up with ideas around branding. Sometimes we would use, like we started Takata HR Solutions. We have like Great Plains Contracting. So a lot of times we'll look in terms of like we've got a new wind solar company. But what we found is how do you deal with when you're working with the branding company, with a graphic designer company, and they come back and they really give you, one of the things that I want to say about the brands that you shared, Mark, were that they were so beautiful and they were so colorful. And what you said at the beginning in terms of when you hear your language and how it resonates with you and how it makes you feel. And that's how I feel when I look at really strong Indigenous designs and branding. But sometimes, even if they are an Indigenous company, they get it wrong. And then they come back and we say, you know what, we're not impressed with any of this. It's not resonating with us. And then we have another revision, and then we have a third revision. And sometimes, do you feel, and I'm not saying you, but any guidance in terms of, even from us working with a company such as yourselves, in terms of saying, you know what, you're just not getting us, and any suggestions on how to deal with that? Or, you know, when I have an idea and the person isn't really listening.
So I'm smiling because I fail a lot, and that's part of the process. We actually have a portfolio of unused logos that the client hated or didn't like or didn't want to use. So, you know, we're not perfect, you know, and sometimes the client and the designer don't connect, you know, but that's when we start to ask more questions. And so when a client doesn't like the creative that's being developed, we always go back to the drawing board, and that happens. You know, that happens quite frequently, more than a lot of agencies may care to admit. But that's how we learn, right? We take these steps together and we work together. It's a collaborative process between the designer or the agency and the client. And so sometimes our first crack at the can could be a total misfire. And that happens in my career. That happens a lot. So, but we don't let that stop that process, that creative process. We go back and we say, and we listen to the feedback and what that particular client didn't like. And so maybe it was the color choice, or maybe it was the typography, or maybe it was just the wrong aesthetic, the illustration aesthetic. So we'll go back and we'll go through a round 2, go through a round 3. Sometimes we'll go to round 10. But by the end, you know, we want to make sure that the client is happy with the creative that we produced, and that it is unique and resonates with them. Like I said, with any it's a relationship, and sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's challenging. But in the end, the ultimate goal is for us to create something that is beautiful, that is outstanding, that the client can be happy with. So sometimes we have to go back to that drawing board more often than not. So that's really just the lay of the land sometimes. And if an agency says, well, you know what, I'm fed up, I'm going to leave, well, that really kind of comes down to experience. If I was younger, when I was right out of design school, I would have thrown up my hands and said, I'm done. But as you get older, you begin to realize that patience and wanting to develop something that you both can be proud of is takes time sometimes, and it may take a long time. I mean, I remember I was working with a company in Ontario, and we were working on an annual report for them. And so we worked on this annual report for almost a year. And so we would go and meet with them. And there was, it was in a boardroom up in Ottawa. I think it was like 20 stories high. We were in the boardroom. And the first meeting, we noticed that down beside there was new construction happening. They built that building, that high rise, faster than we did that annual report. So sometimes you have to have patience and it takes time. But in the end, we were both happy with what product we produced. And sometimes it takes time. And so, and in my teachings and in my experience with speaking to elders and knowledge keepers, sometimes we have to wait, and sometimes we have to be patient to get it done right.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think you just reminded me. So in a previous life, I used to direct a company on the London Stock Exchange, and I hired a company in the UK to do a rebrand. And I remember that period where they would give you all the different proofs and you would know immediately if you like something or not. And yeah, it was it was really instantaneous. But I suppose that further refinement to get the final product that you love takes some time. I'm just mindful of time, so we have about 15 minutes left. I know John is in the next in the queue to ask a question. So go ahead, John. Oh, we can't hear you. Maybe your mic's not plugged in.
How's that?
There we go.
Am I on? Okay. Sorry, every time someone makes a comment, my question changes. And I wanted to bring up Archie Gray Owl and talk about him now. But anyways, I'll stick to my original question. So yeah, thanks for doing this, Raylene, and thanks for coming on, Mark. Welcome, everybody. I guess everyone's been introducing themselves and where they're from. I'm coming to you today far from my traditional territory of the Ottawa Valley. I'm Algonquin, and I'm actually probably just north of where Claude is, or my home is right north of where Claude is right now. And I'm on the West Coast currently. Part of what the work I do is I try to collaborate between communities and help their businesses grow, promote their businesses. And something that has come up numerous times is when you have two communities competing against each other for on similar projects. And currently, and it's even happened in the past, but right on my doorstep right now is we have communities that will compete against projects and actually try to market themselves with the same branding. And then you'll start to see, basically confrontation happen between them and who gets the branding first and how do they represent themselves. So Mark, my question to you is, have you seen communities compete like this? And do you have any examples when you helped negotiate like a ceasefire between the two. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I guess fortunately we haven't come across that situation at all. Unfortunately, I guess how we would handle that would be through a facilitation process, and trying to get those two communities together. And that sometimes might be very difficult to do, especially when we start bringing in lawyers and such. So for me, honestly, I can't speak too eloquently or with too much expertise on that because I've never come across that situation before.
Yeah, sorry. Maybe I can go back to one of my other questions, but time's of the essence. But I'll stand down. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it, and thanks again, guys, for putting this together.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think it is maybe it may be surprising to our non-Canadian network, but Canada's Indigenous population is so diverse. We have many different cultures, languages, and the process that our federal government and the kind of British colony and French, even before Canada was a country, the process they used to kind of control us and colonize us was unfortunately to cause us to divide. So I think that there is some historical factors there, but yeah, really, really difficult. And it's one of my hopes through INDIGI-X and kind of collaborating as an Indigenous community globally, we can begin to understand how other countries or other populations have dealt with that, or maybe find a solution together. So we have two more people in the queue for questions. I think Bob had a question, and then Eugene. Bob, do you want to go next? You're on mute, Bob.
There we go. I think just one word of caution. In the 50 years that I've been here in Muskwachees, coming to start Muskwachees College and carry it on, and one of the number of things that I have learned, and there are signs and symbols of that. You did an excellent job, Mark, of relating to the ox cart and all the different ones. And I see in some people will use a pipe and a graphic of that kind of thing. One of the things I think is really important to note, and in my 8 decades, is that the old people and tell us that all of our ceremonies and knowledge is sacred, but it's not secret. There are a number of things in certain ceremonies that are secret, but the sacredness of all of that is important. And to just oftentimes I see somebody take a depiction of a ceremonial pipe and use it for a logo is quite a different concept. So that's the one bit of ancient knowledge I really want to share, is that all of this knowledge and way of doing things are sacred, but they're not secret. And when you go to an elder and you offer the protocols and seek the knowledge, you may or may not receive it, but it's a sacred way of doing it and passing it. And Mark, you referred to oral tradition, excellent. And that's so important, that the sacredness of those teachings that are passed down in important ways have protocols that go with them. And the knowledge that goes with them often requires an understanding of the language. And I think early on, I talked about the day sun and the night sun in Cree, Tipskaupisim, and that's really important to understand those things. And I'm sure you do that when you're in your own communities, of get that knowledge of how it's done in that community, and very important. But those two points I'd like to make is that our things are sacred and they're not for sale, but but not all of them are secret. There are some secret things, and that's important to acknowledge. So I wouldn't want to see logos made with sacred symbols other than some universals and that kind of thing. So thank you for listening to that, Di. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Miigwech, Bob, for your words of wisdom. You are quite correct in that you are right. Everything is sacred, but a lot of things aren't secret. And I love that term. Do you mind if I use that in another presentation? It's amazing. And I love that. And so I just want to say thank you again for that. And I'll shut up now because I know we've got another question here.
Eugene, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Raylene. Oh, first, koutou he mihi nui atu nei I tēnei wā, ki te tautoko ngā kaupapa I tēnei zui, ki te tautoko he tangata o te ao nei. Yes, kia ora everyone, welcome. My name is Eugene from Te Arawa, sort of like my main tribe here in Rotorua, New Zealand. It's 26 degrees, which I think is 78 degrees Fahrenheit. So the great thing on this Zoom meeting is there's only 100-degree difference between us. So that's it. And I shudder to think, Mariah, what the temperature is in Fiji. But hey, look, just a couple of things, and really quickly, they're not so much questions, but I just wanted to share a couple of things as to how we view some of these things. And a lot of the kōrero, a lot of the speaking so far resonates really well. Raylene, in answer to your question, same colonizer, same impact. You know, it's their thing. So a lot of these things resonate really well. But just in the things, I was really taken with your values and principles, Mark. We have a number we use here. They're nicknamed the tangas, but it's things like manakitanga, hospitality, rangatiratanga, leadership and self-determination, whanaungatanga, the importance of relationships, kaitiakitanga, guardianship. So again, having those core Indigenous principles as part of our leadership and decision-making process actually makes it quite easy to work out what you should and should not do. I was interested in your point. Yeah, there's a fine line between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation, but I really liked your point, and I summarized one of the things. When you consider the teachings the symbols use, one of the things I took from that is if you use it, you have to live it. And for instance, there's a whakatauki, a saying that's used a lot here within mainstream, he waka eke noa, which is simply translated as we're all in this canoe together. But actually that's used quite a lot to say by mainstream organizations, you know, we're all in this. But then you have to ask, have you guys ever been in a waka? Have you been in a canoe? Have you actually tried paddling in the same direction? Have you actually tried, you know, because there's a lot of things that come with that. So that importance that if you use these, you have to live it. But look, the last thing that I wanted to close off on, and I'll try and be as quick as I can, but if I can share screen, is this working? Can you see my screen? Kapai. Hey, look, this is our website, tarot.co.nz. That's my day job. I run an iwi environmental agency involved in the restoration of the Waikato River, which is the largest river in the North Island of New Zealand. If you have some time, have a look at just up here, the Tirahoi. That's a waka journey we did with our people a couple of weeks ago. The video is gorgeous. It really is. But I just wanted to look at the logo here to give you an idea as to how we address things, because I think what we tend to do here in Aotearoa, we don't so much use sacred symbols, but we use symbols that tie us to the place where we're from. Now, we weren't nomadic as such. So for instance, this is our logo. This symbol here, which I'm pointing at the mouse and I hope you can see, this double koru here is actually representative of the hammerhead shark, which guided our voyaging canoe through a whirlpool to Aotearoa. So this symbol is recognizable as a Te Arawa symbol, but it's a wider generic one. These symbols represent the river, this represents the geysers, and this represents the winds. And so I think what we try and do, and look, there's a lot of stuff on our website, but if I go down to some of the logos of the entities we work through, most of the tribal ones have representations of what's important to them. And these are the tribal ones here. For instance, Tūwharetoa, that's Tongariro, their mountain there. So they tend to use symbols that really identify and resonate with them as opposed to wider ones. Because I take your point, because obviously one of the issues with having been colonized is that the mainstream consider we're all the same, and we're not. Just the last thing too, you'll see some of the agencies we work with, like the Department of Conservation, they've incorporated some of our symbolism into their logos as well. The koru here, that's a symbol of new life, because it's the it's a fern frond unfurling. So you get examples there, but they tend to be more generic, and we tend to steer clear of more that sacred symbol stuff. The waka, the canoes that my own tribe have, the guidance my kaumātua, my elders gave me, was not to get them carved with tupuna representations or ancestor representations, because as soon as you do that, there's a whole lot of tikanga, a whole lot of kawa, tikanga kawa. There's a whole lot of rules that come with that. So we tend to keep stuff fairly generic so that you don't have to pass through those things. So look, all I wanted to do was just share some of the things that we do over here, just to give an idea. Some are the same, some are different, but I've really enjoyed these sessions. And if you get a chance to have a look at that Te Rahoi video on our website, it's just lovely. You know, kia ora.
Oh my, Eugene, thank you very much. You know, the artwork that I saw there was just amazing. And when you were speaking your traditional language, I got goosebumps because I love to hear the Maori language. There's something in it that just really has a powerful impact for me emotionally, spiritually. And one day I want to get down there and just experience the culture and just everything about that area and the Maori people. You know, when you were talking about how a lot of the icons and the logos aren't too specific, you know, there are quite a lot of similarities with a lot of our West Coast clients, the Coast Salish, the Tsleil-Waututh, the Tlingit people, both on the coast and inland. They have especially the Tlingit people, they have a very distinct art form. They are very much form lines and very detailed. And so when we work with those particular clients, we don't actually want to be specific as well, because each form line, each shape, each trigon, each ovoid has a specific meaning and inference. And so when we work with these communities, we are very cognizant of the fact that that artwork is very much tied to their culture, their identity, and some instances, some forms can't be used at all. So when we are engaged with our coastal people, we are very cognizant of the fact that we want to work with them in a way that is respectful of their ceremonies and protocols and their own iconography, if you will. That's a very Western term, but they're visuals. And so we are, you know, sometimes we don't want to be too specific, you know, and I really appreciate that that insight that you provided for us here, because I think that's very important as well, that in some cultures, in some nations, you don't want to be that specific, right? So but in most cases, we always want to work with local artists and illustrators that are from that particular nation so that they advise us the do's and don'ts and the pitfalls that we might run into if we go this way, So like I said before, we're always collaborating with those communities so that we ourselves learn more about them, but they also learn from us. And I think that's the big thing here, is that we want to be able to collaborate and share this information, because even though we're Indigenous people, we are all unique and different, and we all have our own set of protocols and ceremonies and ways of doing and being. And I think that makes us so powerful. And I love being Indigenous, man. And I love presenting to you all people here, because I'm learning so much from you. And it's not just me orating and telling you and sharing my knowledge, but I'm getting that knowledge in return. I think that's super powerful. And I wanted to thank all of you for taking the time out today and listening to me talk about what I know and my experiences. So I make which I hold my hands up to you. Thank you.
Okay, Mark, sorry, just to close off on that, support that completely. One of the reasons why we're on board with the Indigenousism program is to be able to facilitate those exchanges, cultural, spiritual, and economic in the future. Bob, I know I've heard your wise voice on a number of Zoom meetings. I look forward to when I can come and visit you. So, and the reason why your West Coast people have similar themes and be the same in Fiji, it's the Pacific that binds us. So again, we're originally voyaging people, so that resonates really well. But hey, I'll stop talking, or else we could be here for days.
Thank you, Eugene. Eugene is an alumni from our first exchange and just a wonderful advocate for Indigi-X. And I just wanted to ask, can I use that quote, same colonizer, same impact? It's funny that the first time I ever felt my indigeneity was accepted was under the gaze of the colonizer in London, but anyhow. Yeah, so that's a wrap, everybody. I'm so pleased that we have so many new faces, and this is the magic of Indigi-X, putting Indigenous people from various countries around the world together in the same room. We find out our commonalities, our differences, and we find solutions together. So really, really keen to have you join our next workshop session, Tafari Huka Huka. They're going to talk about e-commerce and the importance of storytelling in e-commerce. Same time next week. I'll send out a link to everybody that had the invite with a recording of the session and some resources. And yeah, thank you from the bottom of my heart, Mark. You're wonderful at what you do. And yeah, we look forward to welcoming you and Animikii into the Indigi-X network.
Thank you very much, Raylene, for giving me the opportunity to speak to your connections. Very much appreciated. And please email me any questions that you may have. I am opening to answering them, because I know we talked about a lot. We could have went down so many different paths today. So if you have those questions that didn't get answered, please let Raylene know, and then she can forward them on to me, or you can just email me directly. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.